Why are you using pocket holes for everything? Now, okay, maybe you don't, but there are a lot of people out there that use pocket holes for everything they make. Now, I've been doing woodworking for 50 years, and really pocket holes are a new invention. And they're great for some things, but not for everything. So I want to show you 6 categories of joints that you might try and use pocket holes for that I just don't think are a very good idea. I've been accused of hating pocket hole joinery. And while there might be some justification for saying that, I think that's a little harsh. It's not that I hate it, it's just that I don't love it. I don't think it's the do-all and end-all to joinery. Now, pocket hole joinery was designed to be used in hidden places where you're connecting pieces together. That might be a little difficult. Ideally, something like face frames for cabinetry. Kitchen cabinets and bathroom cabinets, you've got usually a 1x2 frame there that the doors are mounted to. And those can be a little difficult to put together if you're going by more traditional methods like mortise and tenon or using dowels. And pocket hole joinery makes a much faster way of putting those together. The nice thing is that because the backside is hidden and nobody sees it, they don't see the joinery, and you get a nice, clean, tight joint. So they're great for that. That doesn't mean pocket holes are ideal for everything. It's just one more tool in our bag. It is not the tool in our bag. The first place I have to say I don't understand people using pocket hole screws is on edge-glued panels. First of all, edge-glued panels don't need pocket hole screws to give them strength. They're strong on their own. The second thing is that they tend to cause misalignment. If you look at my board here, the one side is higher than the other. And that was with me holding them down, trying to keep it well aligned. Could I have aligned it better with clamps? Maybe. Then again, maybe not. Now, people use dominoes and they use biscuits for putting these pieces together, but that's to give them alignment. It really doesn't add to the strength, just like pocket holes really doesn't add to the strength. The second place I'll have to say I really don't understand people using pocket hole joinery on is on miter joints. Now, this is very similar to doing edge-glued panels, but the thing is, edge-glued panels don't need anything to add strength. Mitered joints, so specifically like picture frame joints, yeah, sometimes they do, and especially for narrow ones. Of course, the narrower it is, the harder it is to fit that pocket hole in there. But again, we've got that same alignment problem, okay? And miter joints really need good alignment, and so that's kind of defeating our purpose. If you need something that's going to give you added strength, and you often do with a miter joint, I recommend using some sort of a spline joint, or spline key joint, more correctly mentioned. Here's just a few different samples of different types of spline key joints that you could use. The next place that I think pocket holes really don't work out so well is furniture building. Like if this was a chair leg and this was a spreader going from here to the next leg, and of course we have another spreader going this way, all right, we can put the pocket holes on the inside of the leg, and they're kind of hidden. But then again, at certain angles, they won't be. Does it work? Yes, it will work, and it'll work effectively. The trick here is hiding the pocket holes. The whole idea behind pocket holes is to put them someplace where they can't be seen. This is going to be a little bit challenging. Yes, you can put the dowel plugs in there and you can plug those holes fairly effectively. But will it be as good as if you used some other joinery method? Probably not. Now, the traditional method to use here is a mortise and tenon. And I get it that a lot of people aren't comfortable doing mortise and tenons, but they're a basic of woodworking. And they're really not that hard to do. It just takes a little practice. You can cut tenons on the table saw very, very easily. And you can cut mortises using a drill press, using a hand drill, clean them up with a chisel. You've got a good solid joint that'll last for years. I think we're up to the fourth item on my list, and the fourth item is drawers. Now, granted, this is a really little drawer, and it is not made with pocket screws. I will have to say, pocket hole screws do a great job of making drawers. You can make drawers out of that way if that's what you want to do, and I'm not against that. My concern here is cost. Now, the special screws that are used for pocket hole joinery are rather expensive when we compare them to, say, regular wood screws or even construction screws. When you're up in that price, what does that do to your overall cost to your project? Now, we as hobbyists, woodworkers, as do-it-yourselfers, often complain about not having enough money for our projects or for the things we'd like to do or the tools we'd like to buy. So saving money is important. Now, if you've got a commercial shop or you're doing a project for somebody and you've got to make 100 drawers, go for it. use those pocket hole screws because it's going to save you time. It makes sense. But if you're making a few drawers for your own workshop, for your own bathroom, whatever, it's a waste of money to use pocket holes, especially when you can use, say, something like a half lap. This is put together with a half lap. There's a lot of other types of joinery you can use for drawers, like finger joints, or some people call them box joints. It's the same thing, it's just two different names. Dovetail joints, half dovetail, like blind dovetail joints. A lot of different forms of joinery you can use. Now, those others are more complicated, which is why my little example here is nothing more than half laps. This is something really easy. And if you've got a table saw or a decent miter saw, you can do this yourself and come out with decent drawers. It's not going to take a lot of time. It really isn't that hard to learn how to do. So why waste the money on hardware that go ahead and save those screws for a project where you really need them? Let's not waste money and then complain we don't have the money for the projects we want to do. The next thing I've seen that I like to mention is hanging stuff on the wall with pocket hole screws. Yes, I've seen people try this. It's not very common, and it's not something you really want to do. Why do you want to do it? Well, our walls are made of drywall, and drywall really isn't all that strong. If you try and hang something like, say, your television on the wall using pocket hole screws, you're really asking for trouble. The drywall itself won't support it. You can say the same thing about hanging pictures as well, but pictures are a lot lighter than a television or a lot lighter than a shelf. Anytime you're hanging anything of weight on a wall, you really need to go through the drywall and into a stud. So the trick's finding a stud and then using either a regular nail or a regular screw going through the drywall and into that. Pocket holes, they're not going to go through the drywall, so forget about them reaching the stud. So you're not going to get any real strength out of them, and most likely whatever is on the wall won't stay there. It'll end up on the floor. The last thing I want to mention where I think using pocket hole screws really isn't the answer is shelves, or we could really expand that out to anything structural. Now, pocket hole screws are easy to work with and they do a fairly good job, but they're really not intended to hold up a lot of weight, okay? Now, if we look at this shelf, I've got pocket hole screws there on the underside of the shelves holding the shelf to the side pieces, both the upper and the lower. So the weight is being transferred from the shelf, if I got, say, boxes of hardware piled up here, to those screws and then to the side pieces. But the screws are angled up, which means that the weight is trying to pull those screws out. Will it fail? Yeah, probably, eventually. You know, of course, but a lot of that depends on how much weight I pile on. So there's a limiting factor here in how much weight this shelf can support simply because of the design, all right? There's really no easy transfer of weight from the shelves to the sides except for the screws, and the screws don't go all the way through the wood. They only go in part way. And because they only go in part way, there's a limit to their strength. Now, by comparison, I've got here a shelf made with dados, the old-fashioned way, okay? And dados are not that hard to make. If you own a table saw or a decent miter saw, you can do dados very, very easily and very, very accurately. So in this case, I've got dados here inset into these sides for this middle shelf. Okay, now I've got dados here in the ends, or in this top shelf actually, for the ends to stick up into. So though any weight that's piled on top one, well, obviously because this is sitting on top of the sides instead of butting into the sides, the weight transfer is really, really easy. Here, we also have a good weight transfer because the shelf is at least partially sitting on these pieces. It's not sitting on hardware, it's sitting wood to wood. So literally for this shelf to fail, the wood fibers going down from here on both sides would have to collapse, at least to some extent. That's the only thing that could cause it to fail. Granted, impact, yeah, okay, we could take a sledgehammer and bust the shelf up and yeah, it would fail, but that's not what we're talking about. So there's a limit to how much strength this has, and there's much less limit to how much strength this has. Now let's take this and look at some other pieces of furniture, okay? What about a sofa? All right, sofa, as we were talking about with the chairs, you've got those spreaders, like under the, going all the way across and into the legs, okay? Again, we're looking at all the weight bearing on just on those screws instead of screws holding things together. So it's dependent on how much weight the screws can handle. More screws can handle more weight, but you know, you hit a point of ridiculous. What about a bed? Would you trust a bed if it was just put together with pocket hole screws? Now think about that. You're laying on the bed, or you and your spouse are laying on that bed, or the kids are jumping up and down on the bed. There's a lot of weight on those screws if you put it together with pocket hole screws. If you look at the way beds are normally made, the bed has slats that rest on rails, and it's all wood-to-wood support, with the exception of where there are bolts holding the side rails to the headboard and the footboard. But there's an awful lot more support than a screw. A bolt's going to give you more support than a screw. So anywhere where you're needing a lot of support, a lot of strength, pocket hole screws probably aren't the best solution.